Shalom, everyone. This week I want to talk about one of the most powerful stories in the entire Torah. In fact, it's so powerful I wrote about it when I wrote my book, How to Forgive When You Can't Forget, many years ago already. We come to the conclusion of the story of Joseph and his brothers. You may recall that when we first meet them, Joseph and his brothers really don't get along at all. They can't even speak to each other civilly. The brothers have a tremendous animosity for Joseph. And as the story unfolds, they do what is inconceivable. They sell Joseph into slavery in Egypt. The years go by and things go pretty well for Joseph. He becomes the second most powerful man in Egypt next to the Pharaoh. But in Israel things are not so well. They're not going well at all. There's a famine in the land. And so Joseph's father, Jacob, has to send the brothers down to Egypt to purchase some food. They do that and they find themselves standing in front of this man, this powerful man in Egypt, whom they don't recognize at all, but he recognizes them. That man is Joseph, their brother. And Joseph looks at them, sees that these are the very men, his brothers, who sold him into slavery. He doesn't tell them who he is. And the Torah goes through an elaborate scenario, we're told, so that Joseph could see, could determine if at the end of the day something had changed, if the brothers had somehow become different. He wanted to see if they were or were not the same brothers or men who had sold him into slavery years before. He needed to know if they had undergone a change of heart. He finds over the course of time that, yes, these brothers of his had indeed changed. They weren't the same men they once were, that they were more responsible, more caring, more compassionate. And so at this moment of great drama, Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers and says to them, Ani Yosef Achichem. I am Joseph, your brother. And they are stunned and shocked. They don't know what to say. The Torah goes on to tell us that Joseph walked over to them, hugged each one of them, kissed each one of them, and cried with them. And they were finally able to speak one to the other. You can imagine the scene. The brothers who had actually considered for a few moments killing him, the brothers who had thrown him into a pit, the brothers who had sold him into slavery, and he decides to forgive these brothers of his. The brothers who had taken away so many years from him. He has them in his grasp. He could do whatever he wanted to them. And he hugs and he kisses them. And he cries and he forgives them. So why? How does he do it? Where does it all come from? Why does Joseph forgive them? Well, maybe Joseph remembers that as a young man, he wasn't so perfect. And perhaps he recalls that his parents, they too weren't so perfect. And his grandparents, not so perfect either. And Joseph might have come to the realization that imperfect people need to be able to forgive imperfect people. Maybe that's the reason. Or perhaps Joseph just comes to the conclusion that too much time had already been lost. And he wanted the relationship more than he wanted the anger. So what can we learn from this story? Each one of us has to consider what kind of person we wish to be. Forgiving or angry. And the story tells me that we each need to decide what it is that we want to bring into this world. Can we be a little bit like Joseph, who sees these men standing in front of him who had done such a terrible thing to him. And yet, he finds it possible to forgive them, to say, I am Joseph, your brother. His answer to the cruelty of his brothers is forgiveness. Perhaps Joseph did understand that the world is imperfect, filled with imperfect people, and it's a world which can never, ever be perfect. All we can do is be a little bit like Joseph and try to make this world a little bit kinder and a little bit better. Shabbat Shalom.